Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm the City Witch. So I have a brand new book review for you guys this week. This one is called Besom, Stang and Sword, a guide to traditional witchcraft, the sixfold path and the hidden landscape. It's written by Christopher Orapello and Tara Love Maguri. I do hope I'm saying their names correctly. I apologise if I'm not. I do have a tendency to butcher names. So this is a close-up of the front cover of the book. Now, personally, I don't mind it, but some people have left comments on Amazon saying that they thought this book related to darker workings due to the black, white and red imagery on the front. I personally didn't get that. I really like this symbol in the middle. I thought it was quite old school and really nicely done and well designed. Plus you can tell there is a symbol as well as a beautiful image, which the symbol and the reason they've put this on the front cover is explained in the book, by the way. Now, I'm here to tell you this book is not full of dark magic. It is a rather balanced book containing both types of spells, some for positive and some for more baneful workings. So that was the first thing that I liked about this book. It gives you all the information and what you do with it is completely up to you. So it's not sugarcoating anything, it's not hiding an entire section of the craft from you. It is giving you the information you need, and what you do with it is completely up to you and whether you want to do it in your practice, basically. On the back of the book, we have Step Onto the Crooked Path, and then an introduction to the book. You get a lovely little picture of the authors right there, and then a little bit about each author. We also get this really nice comment from Amy Blackthorne. She is the author of Blackthorne's Botanical Magic, which is also another excellent book, by the way. So she says, Orapello and Maguri have done it. Besom, Stang and Sword is a comprehensive guide to traditional witchcraft as one could ask for. It may take a few days to read, but will keep you engaged for a lifetime. And I have to say, I do agree with that comment because I thoroughly enjoyed this book and I'm still referring to it now in my practice. There are some really excellent things contained within. So before I tell you the points that I want to talk about and the things that I found interesting in the book, I'm going to first talk to you about the contents so you know what you'll get inside this book. So this book was written in 2018. We get a rather nice introduction and the book is filled with all these beautiful imagery. The contents, here we go. So in the contents of the book, chapter 1 is all about traditional witchcraft. So it kind of gives you a bit of a history lesson on what traditional witchcraft is and its origins. Chapter 2, Besom, Stang and Sword. So this is where it's talking to you about the traditional items used in traditional witchcraft and what they are each used for. And then it does recommend a few other items that you might like to have in your magical practice. Chapter 3, Magic and Spells. Chapter 4, Divination. Chapter 5, Herbalism. Chapter 6, The Black Tree. Chapter 7, The Hidden Landscape. Chapter 8, which was my favourite in this book, was all about necromancy. Chapter 9 is Hedge Witchery, and Chapter 10, The Witch's Sabbath. Chapter 11, The Lunar Year, and Chapter 12, The Crooked Path. And then you get some acknowledgements, further reading insights, and then index of rituals and spells, an index of exercises, so that you can find them easily time and time again. And then, like I said, you get this beautiful introduction in the book, and then throughout the book, you get lovely pieces of art and lots of symbols and imagery to work with. So here we have the lovely Baphomet. There you go. So that's the symbol that was on the front cover, if you remember, and then they further embellished it. And then you get these really nice setups here where they're showing you rituals, altar layouts, drawing the different various pentagrams and patterns and designs that they incorporate in their practice. There is some information on how to write petitions correctly. And of course some spells. So the Evil Eye, the one before that was Stopping Gossip. We have a blessing, cleansing and clearing. We have a sage bath, an uncrossing rite, love, prosperity, and protection working. So there's quite a few different spells that you can try for yourself in this book. There's a whole section on divination, and here we have a beautiful image of crystal ball. Let's see what else we have. We have a whole section on herbalism, as I say, and then we have the black tree. And then in this is where they break down the symbol that's on the front of the book and why it looks like that. So this is the description of that and the witch's hexagram, and then it goes into great detail about what that is if you never heard about it before. And then here they talk about meeting the Witch Queen, which, to be honest, this imagery kind of reminded me a lot of Hecate, because there's a lot of her symbols on it. So we have snakes, we have a key, we have a sword, we have the flaming torch, we have a scythe, and we even have one of her favourite fruits, which is an apple. And then we have a broom, connection to witchcraft. So to me, this was very much an image of Hecate, but not one I've seen before. But he doesn't say this is Hecate. It's just what I associated it to be, because it kind of reminded me of Hecate. But this is supposed to be the image that they use for the Witch Queen. And the Witch Queen is explained in detail in the book, and their interpretation of her and her energies. Yeah, and then the book kind of continues on into necromancy, hedge witchery, and there's lots of different exercises for you to try all through the book. And like I said, at the back, you get those tables of contents, which helps you refine things when you are ready. So, personal points on this book. So the first thing I want to say is throughout the book, you are given exercises, meditations, rituals, spells, and creative ideas to try for yourself. You are prompted at many points throughout the book to journal and to design and create your own things and use the things they've given you as a foundation to build your own craft and practice, which is something that I really liked about this book. Another thing that I want to say about this book is at the end of every chapter, and this is probably my favourite thing about the book, is they give you a recommended reading list. Now, each chapter, as I say, is broken down. So let's use, for example, the necromancy chapter, which was chapter 8, which was my favourite chapter in the book. At the end of that, they give you further books for you to read on the subject of necromancy, ancestors, and the dead. And they tell you the title of the book, when it was written, and the author. So you can go away and find that book, and if that was a subject that interested you, you can obviously further read into it, further developing your practice. And I absolutely loved that about this book, because not every book does that. Not every author thinks, oh, let's give my resources, let's provide further reading material. Most of them will just do a reference guide at the back, or a recommended reading list right at the back of the book. But I like that this is broken down into the chapters so that you can make note of that straight away when you finish that chapter. And if it's something you want to continue and put a pause on this book for now, you can go further into that subject by reading a separate book and then come back to this when you're ready for the next chapter. Because the idea is that you'll work through this like an exercise. So I really loved that, and it's definitely my favourite thing about this book. So Christopher and Tara teach you how to properly lay a compass in this book. So as we know, in traditional witchcraft, they don't tend to cast a circle. Laying a compass was far more traditional. So in their practice of the Black Tree Coven, which is the coven that Christopher and Tara run, they talk about the differences between a compass and a circle. They tell you the differences between the two so you understand them fully, and they make recommendations about when and where to use a compass versus a circle, and so on and so forth. So both have their place in this practice. So you shouldn't use one over the other. You should know which one is best for the working you're going to do. And they beautifully detail that and teach you about the differences, which I enjoyed. In the first chapter, they talk about an introduction to traditional witchcraft. So they give you the heritage of it. So traditional witchcraft originates in England. So it is a native practice to me and my home country, since I do reside in the United Kingdom. So I am English and it is native to me. Now, the writers of this book are American. And what I enjoyed about this book was Not only do they give you the original way of doing it if you still reside in the United Kingdom and want to practice like a traditional English witch, they also give you a European variation so that those of you who live in places like America or, you know, France or Germany, and a lot of your herbs and ingredients and the way of doing things is different, they give you a tried and tested way of doing it to adapt traditional witchcraft from England to your practice in other countries. And I thought that was a stroke of genius, and they do it in a really respectful way. And just for those of you who are wondering at this point, traditional witchcraft is an open practice. Anyone can practice it, however, it is native to England. Where possible, try to stick to the English way of doing things out of respect for the tradition and the practices, and obviously where it comes from. Just like I'd expect you, if you're going to learn hoodoo or voodoo or brujeria, you know, any of those other practices out there, that you are respectful to those practices and try to stick to the way that they're done, because there's reasons for doing things, guys. But I do like in this book that they do give you alternatives. So they've done part of the work for you where they've gone, okay, this herb only grows in the United Kingdom. You're going to struggle to get it anywhere else. So here is our alternative that we've tried and tested and it works. So they're giving you those differences straight away, which is going to save you time and money. But they also give you the original. So if you want to stay true to the practice and where it came from, you can go out of your way to buy those ingredients and do things the way they're traditionally done if you so choose, which is brilliant. So that was a good point of this book. They also provide 3 altar ideas in this book. So they recommend having 3 separate altars for 3 different areas of your practice. So the first altar they talk about is the genus loci. So this is the altar where you dedicate time and energy to the local spirits of where you live. So they talk about this quite strongly in the book, and I really enjoyed this idea. And actually, when I thought about it and I thought to myself, oh, I'll do that, I actually already had a spirit altar set up where I practice my shamanism, which connects me to all of the local spirits that I work with anyway. So I already had a genus loci altar without realizing it. So they put what I was doing into perspective for me and gave me some new fresh ideas on it, which was brilliant. The other altar they recommend is an ancestral altar. So that is where you'll work with the beloved dead, the honorable dead, your ancestors, your bloodline, your heritage, and where you'll connect to your guides. So that one was also a really interesting one. And actually I already was doing that as well, because my ancestral altar is part of my altar for La Santa Morte, which obviously is Lady Death. And she watches over my ancestors, and I work with my ancestors and her together through that one altar. So again, that was something I was already doing, but I do again recommend that if you have the space. And then the final altar was the sacrificial altar. So that was the altar where you make sacrifices and offerings to your spirits, venerating them and thanking them for the help that they give you in your practice. But also it's the active working altar where you will also cast your spells. So if you have a altar already, that would be your sacrificial altar where you would leave offerings, dedications, prayers, and you would do your rituals, and you would thank all the spirits and entities that you work with. So if you're doing that anyway, you have already a sacrificial altar. It's just they call it a sacrificial altar in this book, whereas most of the time we just refer to it as our altar, our personal altar. So that was also really interesting, and I thoroughly enjoyed the chapter on those 3 altars. This book also contains spells, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the spells are both positive and baneful. So this book is extremely balanced. It doesn't sugarcoat anything, and it doesn't hide half of the practice of witchcraft from you. Quite the opposite. It gives you all the information, it's upfront and honest, and it makes a point of saying it is up to you what you incorporate in your practice and how you perform your own individual practice. If you want to incorporate baneful workings, you can. If you don't, you don't have to. But they give you spells for both, so that you've got an idea about how to cast and perform both, making this a very balanced book. One unique idea that is discussed in this book that I also really enjoyed was about incorporating a hearth stone, which is a brick from your house or your property that you place on your altar. And this is something I did thanks to this book. So at the time when I read this, we were actually rebuilding a section of my annex, which is where I conduct all of my professional spells and business from. And in that, we used to have an old fireplace in there, but it didn't work anymore and it wasn't legal. So we had it removed, and it was full of all these bricks because it was a stone one. So when we knocked it down, I actually saved all the bricks that were still salvageable, chipping away all the old mortar, and placed them in our garage. So when I read this, I was like, oh, I can use those bricks and put them on my altar as hearthstones. So I gathered myself up some really nice black bricks that I had, and I used them as a pyramid shape on my altar to Hecate, and 3 statues. So the main one I use is in the middle, and then there's 2 slightly lower down next to that, and they're all stood on bricks, which I then wrapped in material that is decorated to look like keys. If you are wondering what the heck I'm talking about, go and look at my social media. All the links are provided on the video, guys. That will show you what I'm talking about, and you'll be able to see my Hecate altar, and you can see on that where they're stood on this platform covered in material with a key design on it. Underneath that material is the bricks that I'm talking about, and that came from the idea of this book, which I thought was brilliant. And that was a way to incorporate energy and spirits from the home into your practice. The other idea they had was placing a message box on your altar, and the in-group rituals and settings when you're gathering and you have witchy friends, you can place messages in the box, so they can be prayers, they can be wishes, messages to the spirits, information or requests, and then on a full moon they would burn them during a full moon rite to send those messages up to the spirits so they could be received, and you could receive your answers, or your wishes could be granted, or if you were asking for information, help, advice, they could provide that to you. And I thought that was brilliant, so I started incorporating that into my practice as well and giving that a go, and I must say I've had good results from that. As mentioned, chapter 8 was my favourite chapter, discussing necromancy, ancestors and spirit work in great detail. I most enjoyed in that chapter conducting the spirit communication ritual, which actually put me in touch with a couple of spirits locally that I now work with on a regular basis thanks to this book. So I will say that ritual works perfectly. Also discussed in this book is the idea of a witch's familiar. So as we know, most people think that their pet is a witch familiar. Now, while I have no doubt your pet does hold a very sacred place in your heart and does help you in your practice, it is not traditionally what a witch's familiar is. A witch's familiar is a spirit, so it doesn't have a corporeal form. And often when it's working with you, it will take on the disguise of an animal, pretending to be something else. So people, when they're looking and they look again, they see a cat or a dog or something normal, but actually it's a spirit that takes on that disguise so that nobody knows what it is. So in this book, they talk in great detail and properly what a witch's familiar is and how you go about acquiring one. Now, same as in The Crooked Path, there is a mention in this book about how a witch's familiar would usually be gifted to you either by a deity or by another witch. So that's usually the common ways that you gain one. However, because witches' familiars have kind of gone on the wayside, it's not something most witches use anymore. A lot of familiars, when their witch passed away, have become obsolete, and they're just wandering around looking for a witch to take them in because they're still bound by a witch's contract. So the idea is in this book that you can actually do a ritual to help put out a call to any familiars in your local area to offer them a home and a place in your practice in exchange for their help and support. And it's a beautiful ritual. I did conduct it and I gained my first animal familiar from this. I did do the one in The Crooked Path by Keldon, but I didn't get a result from that. I had a vision of one where I saw clear blue crystal eyes with kind of black fur around it, but nothing more. And it didn't actually come through, even though I prayed and did the ritual over the course of a couple of weeks. And then when I did the one in this, it finally did present itself, and it is the same familiar because it's confirmed it to me. So I now officially have my familiar. So both rituals do work. I got results from both, but I didn't fully manifest my familiar and bring it into my life until I did the ritual from this book. So moving on, there is also a discussion on the subject of the witch mother in this book. As I pointed out, the artwork to me is very similar to Hecate and had a lot of symbols of her. So to me, she is obviously my goddess, and that very resonated to me. Sometimes they call her the witch mother, sometimes the witch queen. So it talks to you about the differences in the titles. How she's described in this book is very different to how it's described in The Crooked Path by Keldon. The image used, as I say, reminds me of Hecate. Now, I don't mind the description in this book. It was just a little bit different to how Keldon described the energy of the witch mother. So you're going to see some differences in the individual practices and the experiences that these two different authors, or two different sets of authors, because there's two to this one, had with the witch mother. Now, I do work with the witch mother, and I've had very different experiences compared to another witch who also works with her. So I do think it's going to be an individual experience for you if you choose to work with her, but you don't have to. You're also provided in this book with an updated version of the witch's pyramid, or also known as the witch's hexagram. So this was originally designed, and I'm probably going to butcher his name, so I apologise. Eliphas Livy, I think, is her name. And she was a witch who designed the witch's pyramid, which kind of had 4 sections to it. It was later updated and adapted by Aleister Crowley in his workings, adding in a 5th axiom. And then what happened was, when Christopher and Tara Love got hold of that, they started reworking it to add in a 6th axiom, which is actually related to the symbol that's on the front cover of the book. So all of that is fully explained. If you've never heard about what I'm talking about before, all of it is explained in great detail in this book, guys, so you will fully understand it. And they do give references of where this information comes from, and both authors, where you can find some of their workings and what they recommend in order to understand what they're telling you, okay? The other thing is, this book mentions the Black Tree Coven, which is the coven that Christopher and Tara Love run and helped set up and create. Now, they don't by any means push the coven upon you. There is references throughout the book where they mention, oh, this is how we practice in our coven, this is what we did in ours, giving you an example of why they did it, why they updated certain things, and then give you kind of a foundation to be able to update and adapt things to your practice and the way you want to do things. So they don't push the coven on you. However, they do provide information on ways to join the coven, check them out online, and where to become associated with them and communicate with them if you so choose. So completely up to you, but I didn't feel like they were pushing that on me at all in the book, and I didn't mind the mentions every now and again because it did have a point to the mention. It wasn't like they were just pushing the idea of their coven on you and trying to get you to join. It was more a case of, this is where this came from, we adapted it in our coven and we do it this way, but here's some ideas about how you can do it and how you can adapt it. So they're giving you all 3 different ideas there, basically. I will say that they don't practice the Wiccan Wheel of the Year. There is a section where they talk about this and the seasons and cycles. They tend to instead follow more of the moon phases and the cycle of the moon, and they incorporate that more into their practice. When they work with the moon, they did mention, I thought this was a really good idea, and the last point I'm going to make on this book, they talk about how if you want to cast a spell and the moon isn't in the correct phase that you need, in order to do the working, they suggest that you do the opposite. So the example that I'm going to give is, let's say you want more money or you need a new job, but it's the waning moon, which typically is used for pushing things away, whereas you want to draw in money and gain yourself a new job. They suggest you work to banish poverty or unemployment instead, which works in conjunction with the moon's energies. By default, because you're removing the energies you don't want, what's left is what you do want, thus getting the result that you want, but in a slightly different way. So as you're banishing the poverty, what's left would be prosperity, meaning that you would gain the result you were after. And I thought that was very, very clever and an interesting way of looking at it. They also said as well, if you're not in the right moon phase and you can't think of an opposite, that you can instead say that I do not wish the moon to influence my working, that I banish the moon's energies from this space and work only with the spirits. So that was also interesting and something that you could add in as a little mental note when you're casting your spells. So those were all the main points I wanted to talk about in this book. I have to say, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. I highly recommend it, and it was definitely 10 out of 10 from me. I will say, if you are interested in walking the path of the traditional witch, the crooked path, read The Crooked Path by Keldon first, because I think that one was more specific to English traditional witchcraft and walking what is the traditional path of a traditional witch. And also there was a full kind of history lesson in that, how the crooked path was changed to become what most people know as Wicca. So that history lesson and breakdown was very clear and concise and very informative, and he backs it up with lots of research as well. In this, they give you a much shorter introduction, but they still mention some of those changes. But if you want a more detailed explanation and you want something that's much more focused on the way things are done traditionally, The Crooked Path is the book for you. But if you then want to back it up with some new interesting ideas, this would be the next book that I would choose. And I read them one after the other, and I thought they were both brilliant and worked well together. So this is a 10 out of 10 from me, guys. I highly recommend it. I do think you'll enjoy it, and it is very beginner friendly as well. And that's all I have to say on this book, guys. Thank you very much for watching till the end. I do hope you enjoyed my video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Click the bell so YouTube will tell you when my next video comes out. If you'd like to offer light and love to this channel, you can do that through Patreon or my Amazon wishlist. Thank you very much for watching, guys. Take care. Blessed be.